Hi everyone, this is Celine versus Anoushka, played on the 11th of May. So what do we got here? We got a Scotch opening. Okay, D6. That's not normal D6. I'm not familiar with the opening, but I think D6 is just playable. The only lines I know is when you take here and then you go Bishop C5 hitting the knight. And I think there are other options. Just a quick look at the openings book. You can play knight F6 straight away. That looks a bit dodgy, but yeah, Bishop C5 is the main move, and there's a few options here. White can take the knight, or white can play back to B3, or white can play Bishop E3, and that's sort of normal Scotch opening. D6 is possible, and that's what was played. The biggest issue is the swap off of queens. So here it's exactly what white's done. Take, and black should just go into this, should just take the pawn and let the queen swap off. You don't take with a knight because you lose your e-pawn. You take with a king. And white's position is better because this king is just in the way. It can't really find a good spot, and as long as white is very careful with how these pieces are developed, so the bishop sits here, threatening to take this pawn here, and if bishop here, you just trade the bishops off and give black doubled isolated pawns, which is a pain to defend. You end up winning one of them just by maneuvering a knight to c4 and the bishop to b2. Whoops. And just piling everything onto that front pawn because you can't defend it with rooks. And if f6 gets played here, you can just play bishop e3, which stops this bishop from getting to c5, and white's position is just great. And this king is in the way. It's just going to find it difficult to find a good spot. Ideally, black wants to find a way to move this knight so she can play c6, and then the king can sit on c7 for the whole game. And the king would be great on c7 if it could get there. It just takes so many moves, and whilst you're playing all those moves, this whole king side isn't getting developed, which gives white the option to start an attack somewhere else on the board. So it's a very comfortable position for white. It's very difficult for black to play. White just has to make sure she nails those first two bishop moves, bang, bang. And then after that, it's just clean sailing, and it depends on how black plays the position as to how she should continue. But black can hang in there, and put together. It's a difficult position, but it's possible to play like that. But in this position, rather than go into that, black decided on a pawn sacrifice. A very interesting one. I've never seen this before. Is this even in the openings book? Apparently it is. It's been played before. And they got to this position, and here in the openings book it says bishop e2 is what white should play, but instead what did Celine do? She did h2 to h3, which I think, if we go back and look at what the engine's suggesting, the engine's actually suggesting h2 to h3. So the book move bishop e2 isn't even an engine suggestion for some reason. h3, it puts the question to the bishop straight away. It's interesting to wonder what would happen if the bishop took, because the queen could take and then the knight can jump into d4, threatening the queen and threatening this here. I don't think this is anything. I think the queen could just go to d1 or d3 or d1 and just keep everything protected. The other issue is what happens if the bishop just retreats. And the bishop wants to reroute its way to g6 and put pressure on this e-pawn. Just going back 1 second, we have to start looking at what sort of compensation does black have for the pawn. So Anoushka sacrificed a pawn. I don't know if she knew this book sacrifice line or if she made it up on the spot, but it is actually a move. It is a move that's been played by masters in the past. Sack a pawn and you've got 3 pieces developed and your opponent only has 1. And the 1 piece they have developed is pinned. And when you sack a pawn like this, just having quick development isn't enough. You actually need to have a weakness to latch onto. And usually quick development is accompanied with a quick castling and putting pressure straight on your opponent's uncastled king. But in this case, the extra developing moves are queenside developing moves. And because of that, you can't just quickly bang off a castle's rook e8 and start pressurizing the enemy king. So this kind of sack a pawn for quick development isn't as valuable as if you had have gotten quick kingside development, because you can't immediately take advantage of the fact that your opponent's king is still in the center, because your king is still stuck in the center as well. Quick development is also great if there's some other sort of weakness, like if your opponent had double pawns or something, and you could start targeting them with your extra developed pieces straight away, that would be great. But as you can see, white doesn't have any weaknesses. The white's pawn structure on the king side and queen side is perfect. Pawn in the center of the board, and yeah, there's nothing to actually go after, and that's my big concern here. I'm not sure I'm a fan of this pawn sack in general. I really do think going just for this line here and just having the difficult position of your king is a better way to play. So h3 was played, not the book move, but the engine likes it, so it's obviously not bad. And what black has done here is just thrown in a bishop b4 check. So that exposes the queen, so the queens can swap off. But if the queens come off the board, the development advantage isn't as powerful anymore. One of the great things of having better development is that you can go on the attack much faster, very, very quickly. And the key piece in any attack, usually the piece that comes in at the end and deals a killing blow, is the queen. If a huge amount of firepower comes off the board, if the queens come off the board, the advantage of having better development isn't so big an advantage anymore. I don't think it's worth a pawn. So, after a move like c3, both bishops are on pre. So after queen takes, king takes, there's going to be more swap offs. So you're going to be looking at takes, takes, and then what's going to happen is this bishop's going to have to retreat. And yeah, it just seems to me like a move like bishop e3 is fine. You don't have to worry about castling or rook d8. The king has got this lovely square on c2, and with the pawn here, there's no knight checks. With a pawn on e4, there's no bishop check. Not that there's a bishop on the board that can do it anymore, but there's no danger along this diagonal. The king is actually perfect here. It's brilliantly placed, ready for the endgame, and it's taking away the 3 infiltration squares of enemy rooks trying to get in. So this is actually great for white. White should be very happy with this. A pawn up, queens off the board, and a perfectly safe position with the king. So this bishop check here, I don't think is the way to go. I think just retreating would be the way to do it, or just trading on f3. Just trade. You're developing your opponent's queen for her, but at least you've got knight d4, knight e5 ideas to take advantage of this exposed queen. Once again, your lead in development is just not that valuable unless you can get a rook on the e-file very quickly and take advantage of your opponent's king that hasn't been able to castle yet. But white's only 2 moves away. Move the bishop, castle, and it's going to take black 2 moves to get the king castled. So yeah, bishop h5 is probably the best way to play this, with the idea of eventually developing the knight, playing bishop g6, castling, putting the rook on the e-file, and piling immense pressure on this pawn on e4. And that would be probably the way I would want to handle it if I was black. Okay, so let's just get back to a bishop b4. So rather than play c3, which I think is the best, I think definitely the best way to handle this position, because it simplifies everything down to a much better ending for white. White's decided not to let the queens come off the board and decided to play bishop d2. This is also very good for white. I mean, just about everything's good for white in this position. I just don't think the pawn sacrifice was worth it, since you can't get your king castled quickly. So what happened next was the bishop traded, and then the knight traded. So there's 2 more pieces off the board. White's really happy with this situation. The bishop went back to h5, so it's good that the black didn't want to just keep trading. That's good to see. And now queen e2. The engine's actually suggesting this move. It doesn't look like something I would want to play. I'd want to get the bishop out first, pin the knight to the king, threaten to double isolate the pawns, get the king ready to castle, and the queen can always go into e2 a move later. So I'm not entirely sure what the motivation for queen e2 was. It's a bit confusing as to why this move was played, but it does look like it slows white down. Maybe the idea was just get a quick castle queen side in. But this queen is going to have to waste a move again to let this bishop out. which is I'm not too happy with this. So even though the engine's suggesting it, I'm going to give it a thumbs down. I'm not very happy with this move. I think it just breaks few too many principles. Speaking of breaking principles, Black's reply was knight d4. Clever, you know, the knight is pinned, the knight can't take it, otherwise she loses the queen, but it, yeah, Celine's not going to fall for that. Celine's obviously just going to move the queen. You know, the idea behind this is tactically quite clever. The knight goes here, says, please take me so I can win your queen. And if you don't, if you move your queen here, my knight's going to come in here and do some cool knight forking, knight, you know, king and rook, or if the queen moved to e3, grab the queen. So cheap tactics, and it really is cheap because all white has to do is see it and play something like queen d3, or in this case, queen c4. And yeah, now the threat is to just take a free piece, which causes more swap-offs, or at least causes black to retreat the knight. And after the knight retreats, you know, think about what's happened here. The knight's gone here and gone back, and in that time, white has played the queen off the square, so the bishop can now develop, and white has just gained a whole extra free move. So knight d4, cheap tactic, but it just throws away. If your opponent sees your tricks, you're just throwing away a whole move, and that's just too much. Considering the whole point of the pawn sacrifice was to gain moves, to just throw them away again straight away is obviously not the way to play. So after here, what's happened is the knight either has to go back, or the bishop, or some mass trades have to occur. Bishop takes knight, or knight takes knight with some trades, which is just running straight into what white wants, because white's a pawn up. White wants to trade as many pieces as she can. Instead, black has thrown b5, which just throws away a piece and the whole game. This is it, game over now. So just free piece. Obviously not a good way to play. Yeah, either some mass trades or the knight just has to run back, and yeah, b5. So queen takes, and yeah. So here black chose to trade queens. You can't trade queens. You've just lost a piece and a pawn. You're a piece and a pawn down. Even though the engine's saying the best move on the board is to trade queens, no, in a practical way, this is not the best way to play. The queen should be getting out of danger from the queen somehow. It's hard to find a way because this pawn here is on pre. The queen's threatening to just run in and grab this and win the rook. How should black play this? That's the question. Yeah, well, at the very least, don't give your opponent a free move by taking it. The queen trade might be necessary, but at the what you should be doing is developing a piece. Make her take you, so that after you take, you get your rook into play with tempo. There's more issues going on here as well. This pawn is on pre. Everything's on pre. There just aren't any good moves here. I'd almost prefer, on practical sense, to just say, go ahead, take my rook. I'm gonna avoid the queen trade and give myself some chances to get back into this. So something like queen here, for instance, and trying to do some sneaky tactics. Like if the queen does try and run in and take this, you might be able to do something like this. And you know, I know it's really ridiculous chess, but at least you can generate some threat. Oh, that doesn't work, does it? It doesn't work. The queen on a8 defends knight there. Okay, ignore everything I just said. Yeah, okay, so you can't even sack the rook, can you? Knight f6, queen takes. You can't even do any of that. This is just so bad. Maybe castle. Okay, maybe that's the way to do it, and say, go ahead, take me, and then you go bang, knight here, and then you've got the threat on the queen. Okay, that's a better way to handle it. So the queen goes to g7 to get out of danger, and then you can start doing this. And now you're threatening discovered checks. And you know, if white doesn't do something correct, you know, if white doesn't like g4 or something, suddenly you're right back in this, and you've got knight takes d2 and do with the discovered check, and the game is now anyone's game. But if white just plays sensibly, even white can just take this, I think, because after takes bishop e2, it's hard to see what black can do. It's just a whole rook down. You know, I mean, taking here would be the normal idea to double the pawns, but you don't want to swap pieces off. Rook, I don't know. Queen here is the danger. Can you play rook there, maybe? No. Why can you just say, go ahead, take my bishop. I'm winning easily, and just trade and just. That doesn't even work, does it? Because rook there and the rook's on pre. So it's so bad that you can't even generate some play. But at least this gives you a chance. Swapping the queens gives you no chance at all. It is the best move according to the engine, but in practical sense, someone as good as Celine is not going to mess this up. She's just not gonna have any trouble winning this from here. So after it takes, what have we got? We got rook e8. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, except to say that you got to develop. Open some lines, sure. Play something like f5 and see if your opponent grabs the pawn, and then maybe you can, you know. Well, actually, that's very strong, isn't it? Oh, yeah. I mean, there's an idea for you. F5, something like that. Or even just develop knight f6 and get the rooks going really, really quickly. Hope your opponent wastes time stealing pawns, as the engine suggests, and you gain free moves here. And then you get your other rook into the action and maybe get some play going that way. So castles, knight takes, rook e8. This rook is already on a brilliant spot on the d-file. There's no reason to move it again. Get the rest of your army out. The only way you're going to come back from this position is if you get your pieces really, really active. And sitting in the corner playing computer games or whatever these two pieces are doing is not going to get you a win. You have to get these pieces off, kick them off their backsides, get them in the middle, and get them fighting. So rook e8, yeah, not going to work. F3, c6. No, oh gosh, no. Every time you push a pawn, you give up a square. Giving up the d6 square, just running into a knight fork. There's nothing more to this game. It goes for a lot of moves for some reason. But there's not much more to this game. Trading pieces. You can't trade pieces. I guess a trade is inevitable. F5 maybe. Avoid the trade. Maybe that's the way to do it. It's uncomfortable, but you don't want to trade pieces. You got to keep them on the board. So takes check, takes here, yeah. Hold rook up. There's nothing to this. And yeah, doesn't even bother taking the rook. Grabs the knight instead. Yeah, because the rook was on pre. Yeah, taking the knight was correct. Yeah, check there. Good stuff by white. I think that was a pretty safe and good win by the end. Okay, so I mean, straight out of the opening, we have an interesting thing, very instructive actually. I'm not unhappy that Black has played this pawn sacrifice, because it really does illustrate, if you are sacking a pawn for development, the sort of things that you need to do. And rule one, you don't swap the queens off, and rule two, you need to have some way to get something for your pieces to target. Having pieces developed quickly doesn't work if there's nothing to go after. And yeah, it's sort of a case of, I don't think this is a good pawn sacrifice. It was a nice try. But yeah, being able to develop your king side very quickly is far more valuable than developing your queen side very quickly. Anyway, thanks for listening. I hope people learned something from this game. And yeah, see you later.